Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here, another episode of Meaningful Live. What's worse, ignorance or apathy? I don't know and I don't care. This program is dedicated by Ryan Webb in appreciation for the Meaningful Life Center's impact. May this bring blessings to Israel and all those seeking guidance. Thank you for that. So, the classic joke, guy asks his friend, what's worse, ignorance or apathy? And he says, I don't know and I don't care. Now, in dealing with problems in life, one of the first go-to approaches, if you can call it that, is denial. You know, you're dealing with a confrontation, dealing with something uncomfortable, dealing with any situation that is disturbing. The easiest thing to do is to avoid. That's what we all do. Now, just for the record, denial has a bad name, but sometimes denial actually works when a person is dealing with a very serious trauma or serious shock. Sometimes denial helps buffer and couch the problem so you can take it slowly. But obviously denial also has, as it suggests, as it implies, that negative side where you're avoiding a problem. So, the two classic ways of avoiding a problem is, I don't know, and I don't care. Ignorance or apathy. Remind me of a classic line, some dance to remember, some dance to forget. There are many things in our lives that we'd like to forget, that we'd like to push away, cover up, what we call put it under the carpet. Often it comes back to bite us or haunt us, but as long as we can get away with it, that's what we do. And it's an interesting phenomenon because the words of Ecclesiastes, he says, Ecclesiastes, I believe it is, or is it Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, more knowledge, more pain. You know, you're more aware, then there's more possibility for pain. Sometimes ignorance is bliss because you don't know the problem. Or we make believe like we don't know. And I'm sure every one of us goes through these different motions at different times in life. Sometimes it can be innocuous, but sometimes it can have very serious consequences. If you ignore or you plead ignorance in situations where you should know better, or you say, I don't care, whatever the reason is, it can often cause you problems and other people problems. That's why they say nip it in the bud. There's a problem, nip it in the bud. Don't ignore it. Because once it begins to fester and grow, who knows what can happen. But human nature is human nature. And today in our world, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, dealing with many different types of people, we have a world that's very disruptive. There's a lot of uncertainty, both on a personal level and on a global level. And often it's just the easiest approach is just to ignore it all. I mean, look, we're now entering the playoff season in football. What a distraction, what a great distraction. Other people, I remember thinking of writing a book about the common cold, because I forget what it was, but someone had told me we were supposed to have a meeting, an appointment, and they canceled because they had under the weather, had a cold. Then a few weeks later, something else happened similar. And I thought to myself, the common cold in many ways has saved many lives because it gives us a legitimate excuse for downtime. So you don't feel guilty because you're not feeling so well. You're almost not feeling well. You're under the weather, over the weather, almost under the weather. So there are things in life, and again, I'm being half a little tongue-in-cheek, but there are things in life that often we need just to be able to take a break and not have to face the consequences. So there are many escapes, especially today. I was mentioning sports, the playoffs, the playoffs, and the same thing with other distractions, whether it's entertainment, which keeps our mind off being constantly very intense and serious. Those people that are always on. They got to be down. You have to have a little downtime. Fully understood. But it's still good to look at yourself and even laugh at ourselves at the way we sometimes plead ignorance or become apathetic. Now, ignorance, there's legitimate ignorance. Sometimes you simply don't know. But then there's also feigned ignorance, or let's call it convenient ignorance. I don't know. Like when they say the person on top, if you didn't know, you're responsible, and if you did know, you're guilty. So either way, if you're a person who's in a leadership position, you cannot afford to not know. But of course, there are lapses. Apathy, obviously, is a far more insidious and even more problematic when apathy is not the right solution, which is basically saying, I don't care one way or the other. You see somebody is hurt, you see an injustice, we should care. That's part of who the human nature is. So I think it goes back to really how we look at ourselves as people. This may sound oversimplified and even almost a bumper sticker when you say, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Well, ignorance and apathy makes you part of the problem, whether you like it or not, because it means that there's nothing being done, definitely not proactive, not even reactive, because you just avoid the whole thing. You see these videos go around once in a while about people, literally tragedies. You see a car ride over someone being mugged, and people walk by and they just avoid the whole situation. They don't want to get into trouble, But the fact is that it really reflects on what the human condition is like. Now, some people are conscientious, sensitive, will never ignore a problem when they see one, if they can do something about it. Others will avoid everything possible. Is it a form of selfishness? Unless it affects you, why should I get involved? Now there's the LA fires raging on the West Coast. Tragic. Besides the lives lost, tremendous amount of property, homes. If it happens to you, no one should ever know of this. It's a complete it's a disaster. Your whole life suddenly burns up. I remember a friend, after I think one of the hurricanes that hit, Hurricane Sandy that hit New York, and he lost his entire home. It was on Rockaway, on the beach. It was his first home, complete home he was a person in the music business for many years. He had many memorabilia and other things, completely gone. These are priceless items. These are just your whole life. In addition, of course, to the danger involved. So we all watch the news and we care, and hopefully we pray for the people and we help charity in other ways. But there's caring and there's caring. And I think when times like this, when there's a challenge, it really helps to define who are you? What do you stand for? War is a terrible thing. But one thing war does, it crystallizes your values. It crystallizes where you stand. Are you ready to fight for something? The United States avoided entering into World War II until Pearl Harbor, where it struck us in the heart. There was no choice, so to speak, for many different reasons, including pride. But when there is a moral injustice, look at World War II. You talk about World War II. There were 6 million Jews, and I speak as a Jew now, that were literally gassed, annihilated. And we know what the world did. Almost nothing. Yes, now we build museums and we remember and we cry and we say it will never happen again. But the question is, do we really ignore injustices simply because it's not convenient for us, or I'm too busy? And that's where it really comes down to what you're made of. Are you part of the problem? Remember, problem doesn't mean you caused the problem. It doesn't even mean that you're participating in the problem. It means you're not doing anything about it. Silence is a form of complicity. That's the fact. It's a form of complicity, especially in certain circumstances. So obviously it's a broad topic, but on a personal level, I'll just give you the moral dilemma. I was once in a restaurant, and I was sitting having a meal with someone, and I saw a few tables down, I saw a family. I didn't know who they were, but it was very clear to me after just watching for a moment, the father was a problem. The way he was speaking to his children, to his spouse, in a very condescending way, in a very aggressive way, and this was in public, let alone what would be in private. And I think one of his sons did something that he didn't like, and he began to really berate him. And I said to myself, what's going on in this person's life? Doesn't look good. Now, I was not trying to pass judgment. I definitely was not in any way coming to any conclusions. I don't know all the details. But I saw there was enough to see, and I had a real moral dilemma. What do? Do I go over and say something? He could say to me, what are you getting in? What are you mixing into my business? Who are you? And he can actually end up punishing the people I'm trying to protect. I was trying to protect. Who knows what he would do, especially once he left the restaurant. To ignore it, I felt really wrong about that because I'm seeing it with my own eyes. Well, should I go report it? What am I reporting? What did I really see? And I remember this is a real dilemma. I ended up not doing anything. But it still remains with me. I believe I wrote an article about it. That was not a way of just relieving myself of the guilt, but I was thinking, I was definitely not apathetic because I was sensitive to the fact, family, and I'm aware of what abuse can be like and what happens behind closed doors and so on. And here, this, as I said, wasn't out even behind closed doors. But at the end of the day, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to do anything because he would easily just brush me off. Now, should I follow them? Should I talk to his wife privately? I just didn't feel it was my position to do so. But one thing for sure, I was not ignoring it. Now, I'm not defending myself. Maybe I should have done. Maybe you would have done something differently. But we have these dilemmas. Sometimes we can do something about it. Sometimes we can't. But we should definitely never just turn the other cheek or turn the other way because it's uncomfortable. I think it's a very critical piece, especially in today's condition, human condition, and circumstances of the world in which we live. I often share the line I heard many times from my father, who was a journalist. He said there are three types of people. People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, and people who ask what happened. We live in a voyeuristic society, let's be honest. We're voyeurism. We live vicariously through Hollywood stars, through television heroes, through sports greats, and so on. And in a way, we feel like we're living through them. But the question is, what responsibility do you take? And it's so easy to say, hey, who am I? I'm nobody. There's so many other people supposed to be responsible. But we're living also in a great vacuum of leadership on every level, especially moral and spiritual leadership. I'd like you to tell me the last time you heard a talk delivered by a political leader, a business leader, a leader in any industry about something visionary about the world in which we live. That's not a speech not self-serving or pandering and so on. Because that's the world in which we live. So we need to take that responsibility. And with everything being amplified by technology, which means we see everything that everyone else is doing, and everything is now collective. Everything is collective. So collective apathy, collective ignorance. It's not just an individual. These things accumulate and create an environment that is definitely a breeding ground for problems. When do we protest? And is protest itself a way to go? Look what's happening today. Look at the abuse of protests. People causes that may have no legitimacy at all. On the contrary, it could be even cruel and evil causes have become now entire industries. So it's time for us to rise up on a grassroots level and say no longer claiming ignorance or claiming apathy. That's not the approach to life. The approach to life is that wherever you are in every given situation, you're responsible to do something about it. And especially in the areas of your sphere of influence. Begin with yourself. Begin with your family, your community, your friends, your associates, your colleagues at work or otherwise. Wherever you go, you are meant to be a proactive entity that should be doing something about it to make that a better place. I'm not just talking about protesting a negative, but to make the little corner of your world, your sphere of influence, where you have impact, to make it a little better. That's proactive living. That's the opposite. That's the diametric opposite of ignorance and apathy. It means getting involved. It means being sensitive. It means acting, doing something about it. Sometimes you can't act, but you have to do something, initiate, to generate. You don't have to wait till someone smiles to you. You can smile to them. And that's how life should be lived. That's when you are in control of your life, is that you are not waiting to react, but you are initiating. And whatever interaction you have, whoever you go, whoever you meet, you can project a positive approach and you'll see the return. Because it's like a mirror image. Now obviously we can't correct and repair everything around us. There are plenty of wrongs being done and injustices. But again, there are many, many areas where we do have the ability to act. And that's the real message here. I think it's more relevant today than ever before, especially because everything is so amplified. So silence, if one person is silent, it's one thing. But collective silence is very loud. And the same thing with apathy. Collective apathy becomes a disease, it becomes a cancer. Because it means we're ignoring things we shouldn't be ignoring, things that we can make a difference. So think of this as a call to action. We spoke about in the previous program, creating a revolution, 2025. Revolutions are created by people like you and I doing something. That's how things happen. And you change something in your life. You make a shift. Now it takes courage, and we live in a world, let's be honest, that fear and insecurity drive so many of our decisions, because either we've been criticized, or we grew up in homes where we were not built, our confidence was not built up. And you need that when it comes to situations like this. But this is the time to reclaim our souls, to reclaim our conscience, to reclaim our responsibility, because there's nothing greater and more dignified than being proactive, than taking a stand, not being ignorant and not being apathetic, but making a move. And whatever situation, whether it's the fires in LA, or whether it's personal fires raging in our personal lives, or it's a problem around us. I'll just conclude with one example. I was giving a program like this a few years ago, and I talked about this message that each of us has, even if you're not a formal mentor, but you should always volunteer wherever you have an opportunity. We never know who needs a good piece of advice, just a sympathetic ear, just someone to lean on, to always be available, as much as possible, of course, to people. And you never know who may need. Everyone has needs. And I said, so next time you see something, try to, in some way, be proactive. Offer, obviously in a respectful way, respecting the space and boundaries around you. Anyway, a woman called me up after this class, and she said to me, I want to share something with you that you inspired. I'm a landlord. I have a tenant. The tenant is a young couple, recently married, and unfortunately, whether I like it or not, they argue and fight. And because I guess you could hear it through the walls or through the floors, as much as I'd like to just drown it out, I can't avoid but hearing how they're constantly fighting. And it really makes me very upset. Not that it's disturbing me, but it's that they can't get along. So I chose to ignore it. It's not my business. What's my business to mix into a couple's issues? They're tenants. I'm not responsible, and it's not my problem. But then I heard your class, and I heard that never just ignore things. Don't play dumb or apathetic. I don't know if those are the words I use, but the idea. Okay, so I decided to muster up the courage, and one day I was waiting for her, the woman in the family, when the husband was gone. I was waiting for her to leave the house, and I would so-called bump into her and just have a woman-to-woman talk. And that's what I did. It was not easy for me because I usually don't mix into other people's business. Anyway, she's walking outside. I go downstairs, and there we are. I say, good morning, how are you? Great. So I said to her, I don't want to butt into your business. It's not my job. But I can help from time to time here that there's some conflicts going on. Now tell me if you don't want me to talk about it with me, I'll never mention it again, and I apologize profusely. She took the risk, she said, because she could have been blown off and say, what are you mixing into my business? But that's what she did. And she said, so I just wanted, if you were open, you want to speak, I'm here, I'm not passing any judgment, I'm not taking sides. Anyway, the woman begins to cry, and she says, you're the first person. I just moved into this neighborhood. I come from a different community, and I'm very touched by your kindness. And she began to talk with her, not necessarily go into depth, takes time to build trust. But that opened up a door and they became good friends. And she says, I became like a friend to her. I'm older than her, the landlord told me. And it's interesting, so she made a move. And now, I don't know whether it resolved the issues, I didn't ask, but definitely she has now someone to talk to. And as we all know, these things make a big difference. You talk to someone, there's support, builds confidence, you can run by, get some objective advice, really see maybe you're the part of the problem. The point is to take that initiative and not be ignorant and not be apathetic. And that's how the world changes. The people in history who took that move, who took that initiative, are the ones that changed history itself. You and I have that power. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic. Sometimes it may not be documented. Unsung heroes are much more plentiful than the sung ones. But that's how differences are made. And it comes down to even in families, even in children. Your child comes home from school. Be sensitive, be aware. Don't let yourself be distracted by your smartphone or by your television or by the internet or by other things. Listen closely. Listen to people. And when need be, make sure that you react. When I say react, I mean proact, but I mean to say that you are not insensitive, that you are aware of what's happening and you're responding in kind. That's how we create revolutions. This is Simon Jacobson, meaningfullife.com. Please check out our offerings, subscribe to them, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, comments, and of course share this with others. It's the whole point, to share. As I said, nothing more dignified than taking a stand, than making an effort, especially in these confusing times where conversations are critical. We need to be able to speak about things. We need to be able to avoid canceling each other and just character assassination. Even if there are disagreements, there are civil ways to disagree. So may you be blessed, may all of us be blessed with the ability to transcend our pettiness and be able to look at the bigger picture and indeed initiate. So, when you ask the question, what's worse, ignorance or apathy, your answer should be, one is worse than the other, and I don't want to be either. Be blessed and be well.